Okay. Hey, everybody. We are at the end of 2024. We're doing some recaps for the end of this year. Today, we're going to have a recap of the AHIMA annual convention or conference in Salt Lake City, and also a recap of the House of Delegates meeting. And then coming up, we'll have an episode on a recap of HIPcast and what we've learned throughout the year with our folks. So, hey, Seth, how's it going?
Hey, Shannan, can you believe we've been doing this for a little over a year? It's pretty crazy to think about.
It's so awesome. It does not seem like it. You know, sometimes when you do things, you're like, oh, it seems like we just started, or oh my gosh, it seems like 10 years. This really seems like it just started.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're a handful of episodes in. I think we're in the 20s at this point, heading towards the 30s. We've got right at 700 followers on LinkedIn, and we've got a bunch of subscribers on all the audio podcast and YouTube stuff. It's just kind of fascinating to watch how this goes, how this has organically grown. But, I was recently on a Mediterranean cruise.
During the annual conference.
During the annual conference, that's right. So I did not attend the House of Delegates or the annual conference. So we had a few episodes leading up to that for like bonus episodes, those type of things, talking about what was going to happen at the House and some of the items around what the board alumni had asked for from a revision perspective. And then I got on a cruise ship and I sat in the buffet and I ate 12 pounds of shrimp and lived my happy life with my stretchy pants, just going all through the Mediterranean. But I'm curious, what happened? That's kind of what I want to know. So I'll ask you, Shannan, since you were there, you went as a participant and attendee of the annual conference. Did you speak at all, or were you an attendee?
Did not
speaking
this
year.
Present. Yep. Did not.
Will next year.
We have never presented at AHIMA.
Oh, have you not? I thought
at AHIMA.
Daniel Utek and I we did a panel discussion on advocacy, and it was a lot of fun. Again, hey, we got to shout out to Lauren Ripplinger.
Always,
she's just always on
keep that consistency. Lauren, let's just say it at the beginning of every episode.
Yeah, exactly. So you were there as an attendee. You also participated as an observer, which we'll get into at the House of Delegates. But first, I'm just curious. Salt Lake City is a great town. It's a lot of fun. We've had a lot of fun in Salt Lake City in the past, but I'm curious, how was Salt Lake City? How was the conference overall?
Listen, I have to say, I went a couple of days early, as I like to do, so that I can experience. I either try to go early or stay a couple of days later so that I can experience the town, the state where we are. And I did go a couple of days early, and remember Mitchell Josephson, the president of the American College of Health Data Management. He and his wife picked me up because they live in Utah. They drove a couple hours to pick me up, and they drove me to Park City. We went to Sundance Resort. Then we went on a beautiful hike, and everything in in Utah was golden. So I'm going to call it Golden Utah. The reds and the oranges had already fallen, but all of those, yellow, probably maple leaves, I suppose, were hanging on, maybe from the aspens too. Anyway, it was gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful. The weather was great the first few days, and then it got cold, then it rained, or maybe it rained, then it got cold. And then the morning I was flying out. It was supposed to snow, and I was like, oh gosh, if it were snowing in Tennessee, I'd be stuck probably. But here in Utah,
they know what they're doing.
I just call an Uber, right? And they'll get me there safely. So, but Utah itself, gorgeous. People were friendly. The food I had around Salt Lake, I had some food from local restaurants there. My goodness, the food was phenomenal. Caputo's Market, I think, is a little Italian place that's a market and a sandwich shop. And so I went there and got a sandwich for the first night. But I also picked up some fresh baked bread and some cheeses and some meats and some fruit, and had some like a charcuterie for my breakfast every morning in my Airbnb. So because I like to stay in Airbnbs, it was great. But the AHIMA conference itself, pretty good vibe overall, I think. A lot of smiling faces, a lot of new staff, but a lot of old friends. Maybe one of the highlights for me was getting to run into Diane Smith. Goodness gracious. I mean, she has just inspired so many people. She has no idea. I know
so
that
wonderful.
she recognizes that she's inspired some folks. She just doesn't even understand, like the people she's never met, that she's inspired. So got to see a lot of friends, got to see some of our Kansas friends that have been on the show. A lot of people actually that have been on the show. And so that was fun. I'll say that the keynote speakers were very inspiring. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and Scott Hamilton, I watched him skate and dance. So I loved his keynote. I loved his address to us.
Is that figure skating?
Yeah, I know you probably never watched it, but he was amazing.
It'd take 3 or 4 people to get me in one of them outfits, so probably not the best idea for me to go down that path. I'd look like the Zamboni going down the ice if I.
You got the ice and you got the skates, but it's the wrong sport, buddy. The wrong sport. Oh, that's awesome, Seth. You're cracking me up. But also Diana Nyad. Now, I have seen her movie. I have not watched the movie. I've just seen that it was available on Netflix or something. I think it was Netflix, but I didn't really know her story. And she was one of the speakers. Goodness gracious, what an inspiring story. She started that again to try to swim from Cuba to the States, to to the Keys or wherever. I guess that's the farthest south point in the United States is the Keys.
Mm-hmm.
She started that effort again at 60 years old.
Wow.
She is 75 now, and she barely acts 50. She is amazing. And her story was incredible. The team that she had around her that she continued to talk about, her right-hand person, everything. She was just really good. So the keynotes were very inspiring. So I loved that a lot. Also, the content was engaging. I know Maria, our president-elect that will start soon, she hosted a panel on social determinants of health. And it was really, really good. She had Thea Campbell and Lauren, and then there was a physician from one of the California hospitals there, and they talked about some of the things that had worked well, some of the barriers, some of the work we still have to do. And Maria is heavily involved also in social determinants for her organization. So
hey, one note on that's pretty interesting. You mentioned having the California doctors up there and Thea's West Coast, and something that I've experienced going to HIMSS every year. They kind of alternate between the East Coast and the West Coast. Is you get that other coast point of view of what they're dealing with from an operational perspective, from an industry perspective, which is it's a unique item because there are differences, right? When I talk to hospitals in the West, when they're transferring patients, they're transferring for hours because of the geography compared to where we're transferring here. It's only a 30-minute flight. It'd be 2 hours by car because our roads are made here in the mountains of Tennessee because they followed the snakes and they followed the rivers. So it's kind of like this: you get behind a coal truck or a log truck. But it is fascinating to hear the different perspectives of healthcare and the issues that people are dealing with from both sides. So if you're an East Coaster from the U.S., it's beneficial to go to the West Coast and listen to what they're dealing with. Same vice versa for the West Coasters coming to the East.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Here, the interesting thing is the patients that we're serving from that perspective, they all have the same needs. They just have different environmental factors that have caused those needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some is access, like in our, remote mountains here in the southeast part of the United States. And then there, maybe there is something there, but there are other factors that have caused barriers for those folks. So some of their challenges or some of their solutions, I suppose, could be leveraged here, but modified for the barriers that we're facing, because the outcomes we're driving for are all the same. So It's a great point. I think you're right. It's always good to know what's happening in other pockets where you're looking for the same outcome. So no matter what's driving it, right?
Yeah.
One other thing, and maybe my favorite thing about what AHIMA did this year, probably, last year they had some feedback on the award ceremony for the AHIMA Triumph Award winners. That there wasn't there wasn't a lot of recognition given, and they weren't really spotlighted very heavily. They had them full out on the main stage, and it was an incredible award ceremony. Maybe one of the things I'm most proud about for AHIMA this year, that they really focused on the members who had won those awards.
Yeah.
I thought that was really significant. So thanks to AHIMA for doing that, because for hearing the membership, that was really great. And they did really, they had great awards. They had a whole segment, probably it probably took 20 to 25 minutes. So they really gave them the stage and the recognition. So I was really proud of that.
Yeah.
One thing I don't remember seeing, there was a lot of good content on privacy and security, on policy, on revenue cycle, of course, but from a coding standpoint, I saw a little bit of coding. I don't remember seeing a lot on coding. And of course, we have a lot of membership who really, that's what they do. A lot of our membership, they're just coders, right? So, but also, it's not fair for me to say it wasn't there, because I really wasn't looking for that. So maybe there was more than I recognized or realized, just because I wasn't paying attention. So
Yeah.
all in all, it was a really fun vibe. The food was really good. That's hard to say. Often you don't get to say that in a conference, but the food was really good. And the receptions and the parties that were hosted by AHIMA and also by vendors, fantastic. I mean, it was a really good networking time. I got to see a lot of meet a lot of people who had heard about HIPcast and said, oh my gosh, Seth is so funny. And I'm like, he is the absolute best person to do a podcast with, because he is so funny. And then there were some people who hadn't heard of HIPcast, and I got to say, hey, check this out. We intend to highlight the profession and the professionals that make it happen. So maybe we've got some new followers to come over and check us out. So yeah, all in all, I think it was a pretty good vibe. And next year is in Minneapolis. And we might have a couple of surprises for that, right? Maybe we'll have a couple of surprises for Minneapolis. We'll see what happens, how it plays
That's
out.
an easy flight. It's a Delta hub for those of us in the Southeast that are Delta travelers. The little rinky-dink airports that we have here in East Tennessee. The rule is you can't go to heaven without going through Atlanta. So, it's one of those things. But, one of the things that's always at the annual meeting is the House of Delegates. Now, neither of us are delegates this year. We've both served in that role for Tennessee in the past. But something you get to do as a member is you can go to any House of Delegates meeting as an observer. You don't get to vote. You elect those that are your delegates from your state that have the voting power on your behalf. But anybody can go, and it's typically the Sunday before. So a lot of people are flying out either that day, or if they go in a day early, you get the opportunity to listen in. And Shannan, you did that, right? How was the House of Delegates?
Well, it was spicy, like it always is, but it wasn't as spicy as I expected it to be, considering all the changes. We recapped some of this, or we not recapped. We gave a summary of what was going to be considered at House of Delegates, a few episodes ago, just to prepare the membership to understand what's happening at the House of Delegates. So, I expected it to be spicier than it was, and it was still spicy enough. I will tell you that it was still spicy enough. But as an observer, I did recognize a few things that really, maybe one main point that I recognize that I want to say for last, because I think it's significant, and I hope that it gets heard by both members, well, all three members, the House of Delegates, as well as the board. And of course, we're all members, but those three entities, being a group and a subgroup and a subgroup, I really want to express something at the end that it was obvious to me. And I don't think if I had been there as a delegate, I would have recognized it, because when you go as a delegate, you have a role. and you have to pay attention and be focused on that role. You do your due diligence before. Then when you're there, you've got to, follow parliamentary process, and you go do these things. So you're really focused on your task that you've been elected by your state to do. So I'll get to that in a second, but just a recap of some of the things that I can share. So there was some transparency in the financial reporting that I have never experienced at AHIMA. Maybe it was done many years ago, but our CFO was on the stage, and he shared, the new CFO. Let's make that clear. We got a new CFO earlier this year, and he was on the stage, and he made a very clear and transparent financial report for us, for everybody that was there. And I won't go into a lot of the details about it, but he did highlight several missteps that had happened. So misallocation, some allocation without board approval, some different things like that. The foundation was involved. Some of our investments, AHIMA investments, were involved. And the board wasn't necessarily involved in those decisions, which they are supposed to be. I can say, as I stated, Tom is the new CFO because some of these missteps have been addressed already, because now that CFO that was here making those decisions is no longer here. And it was kind of fun because one of the House Delegates members said to the CFO, what steps is AHIMA taking to rectify all of these missteps or errors? And he was so funny, in true CFO fashion, because they're just very matter of fact and factual. He said, well, the first step was, I'm on the stage here and someone else isn't. So it was so funny. I was like, good answer, man. I mean, it's exactly the right answer. So if you want to know more about that, maybe ask your delegates about that. But AHIMA,
and it wasn't like a illegal thing or theft. It was just the fact that the old saying was
actions, but no money is missing that we know of. Thank goodness for that. Nobody's stealing from us as members or from AHIMA as the organization. It was just maybe not even kind of misappropriations, but it was
just not following typical accounting
procedures and also typical accounting rules. So
General Dr. Clower, the guy that he walked into a mess. I mean, he's been here a year, I guess, and it's like
he's working on it.
Bunch of needy people that we are, and then he's got all this craziness going on. So,
yes.
Bless him for getting in there and doing the changes and figuring it out. And we've got the new folks. They're going to make sure that everything's done the right way. And it's a positive. It's a little concerning, but the good thing is we know that they have action in place. They're taking care of it. So we do appreciate that he's taking action, and we have a new guy that's taking care of these things and putting the right stuff in there. So
that's
kudos to them.
That's true. And also, in addition to that, another thing that Dr. Clower is doing, he's looked internally and even externally. He's looked internally at potential staff bloat. And then he's looked externally at some of the contracts that we have, and he's made better
staff bloat.
Like too many.
That's what they called me after I got off that cruise ship, was staff bloat.
I noticed you looked a little European when I said to you earlier, you look a little European.
Oh, I'm currently fasting because I'm trying to pull off that cruise 10 that you add on.
That's awesome. But that is another thing Dr. Clower is doing financially. I mean, he really did walk into a mess. And so he is also, he's made some changes to staffing internally, decreased some headcount where we didn't need it. He's brought some things back in-house that we were paying some vendors for. We're also, working on the AHIMA, the new customer engagement, membership engagement platform. So that was a 2.5-year long implementation that still hadn't been done. And while it still has some kinks to work out, it's implemented, right? So he also kind of forced that vendor's hand and stopped wasting some money there, or spending money that we shouldn't have been spending potentially. Not inappropriately. We weren't spending inappropriately there. Let me make that clear. It's just that we weren't requiring them to execute on what they were contracted to do. Dr. Clower's done that too. So he did walk into a mess. And we, as members, didn't realize what kind of mess it was. And so he has definitely taken a lot of steps to move that. So that was a lot of concern at the and here's another thing. The board also did not know many of these things until maybe that week, maybe at the board meeting that happens a day or 2 days before House of Delegates. So
wow.
even the board didn't know some of this. So the board was caught off guard, just like the House. So it was interesting. Another thing, so definitely AHIMA's responded. So I want to be real clear. There have been some misallocations or wrong practices. No, no theft that we know of. But the response by AHIMA with the new CFO, I'm sorry, the new CEO and CFO, it is being addressed. And and they're being very transparent about it. So it's not like they're doing something and hiding it, which I very much appreciate.
Very much appreciate, yeah.
Absolutely. Another thing is the bylaw considerations that we talked about in our, summary leading up to the House of Delegates meeting on HIPcast. When we got to the House of Delegates and me as an observer watching, I think there were a total of 12 bylaw considerations. And the first time in history that I know of, AHIMA had asked an attorney to review 7 of those in particular. And I'm not sure what they would say 7 needed to be reviewed and not all of them, because the House of Delegates governs the profession and the bylaws are governed by the House of Delegates. So not even
That's a
sure.
key point right there, because I think that's the definitional issue that's going to have to be addressed. Is the House of Delegates governs the profession, and the bylaws is part of that. But some of these bylaws recommendations were considered more operational than professional. So that's some of the conversation and chatter that I've heard, is there's got to be some definitional items come out of this at some point. So sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead, Jen.
No, that's exactly. Thank you for making the point. That's exactly right. We're not always clear. And Seth, as long as we've been involved in this, almost every year somebody says, okay, well, then what is the purpose of the House? Well, the purpose of the House is to govern the profession, and they do so through bylaws. Now, they have other opportunities to contribute, right? They can be part of work groups, and they can help with practice councils and different things like that. But the bylaws is probably the top priority, I think, is monitoring, editing, and ensuring that the bylaws are up to date, they're appropriate, and that they're being followed. So you're right, there's a lot of definitional things that have to be built there. In that House of Delegates meeting, AHIMA before, maybe 3 days prior, had sent a legal opinion from an outside counsel to say, we're going to take these 7 off. Well, that was decided to not be appropriate by the House of Delegates, and they voted to put those 7 back on. So there would be 12 considerations. However, and appropriately so, the House also voted to take those 7 that were in consideration. Seth, to your point about those definitional things, let's take those 7 that AHIMA tried to remove and put them back on the agenda. But then let's take them from the agenda to action today and put them in the future. So I think that the final date for what they're going to do about those other 7, I think they might be making a vote on that in March of 2025. So the House will still be working through these between now and March with the board to determine appropriate placement of these things, and then they'll vote on it. So it was a good move, I think, to, first of all, absolutely appropriate to have it added back as consideration, but just as appropriately, let's wait until we've all had more time to consider the full impact and what's operational versus what's bylaw here. So, gotcha. So it was really, I think it was important that we make that clarification that, yes, the House governs the profession, and we do so by governing the bylaws, and the bylaws are fully in the purview of the House. One thing that also is important, board members are voting members of the House of Delegates. And so this is where I want to get into what I noticed as an observer. When I was on the House, while the board members were House of Delegates members, they did not come to the mic to speak. when I've been in the House and for as long as I've been involved, the House of Delegates members that are elected by states to be House members, not board members, but elected by state to be House delegates, they come to the mic and they give their pro and con from whatever the discussion is, or open new items, whatever it is. This year, as an observer, I noticed that some of the board members were at the mic, some more frequently than others. And that felt a little out of place and inappropriate because
Isn't that the role of the Speaker of the House is to represent the House on the board and to represent the board back to the House?
It is. And Deb Beaupre was doing that, and on the stage, and Speaker-elect was beside her, and also a parliamentarian was up there to make sure we were following parliamentary process. So I did notice a lot of board engagement at the mics down on the floor, which I don't think that we have. I'm not sure that we have anything in our policies and procedures that say that's not appropriate, but we did not used to do that. Was not the norm. It wasn't the culture. That is not what we did. The board sat in the back and they allowed the House to have the floor because it's the House delegates meeting. It's even presided over by the Speaker of the House. And so I was a little confused and caught off guard to have so many board members, or not necessarily so many. There were only a few, but they spent quite a bit. Some of them spent quite a bit of time at the mic. So that was a little bit of shock to me as an observer. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I observed, which I don't know why I haven't thought about this before. One of the main things that we have as members, and even as the House, we have trust issues with the HIMA, not because of the current leadership, but because of previous leadership. And not just the last CEO, right, or the last CFO, but even some before that. Like this is an ongoing thing. Yeah, this is not one administration. Okay, this is an ongoing thing. But one of the things that occurred to me, the board, or not the board, but the Kevin, the CEO, Dr. Clower, and Mona, our current president, they were consistently on the stage during the House or in conversation throughout not just the House, but throughout the conference, talking about building trust. And in the House, it was very evident to me that Mona and Kevin both were asking in word, trust me, trust me, trust me. And then indeed, through the financial transparency, building trust, building trust, building trust. I won't say that everything is smooth, but everything is better, in my honest opinion, that we're moving in a good direction for sure. But the thing that struck me the most is the House isn't asking the board to trust them. The House is elected by the state that they represent to manage this profession, right? Or to govern this profession, not to manage. Sorry, wrong word. That's the board in the association. Let me get the right word. But the House is elected by each state to govern this profession. And why is the board putting so much input into the bylaws discussions when the House needs to be trusted to govern the profession? So again, to your point, definitional things need to be worked out. But you know what? I'll say to the board, and I did say this to some of the board members while I was there, so that I could voice it, as, hey, I'm a member, and as you as a board member, please take this back to the board. So I hope this doesn't catch the board off guard, because I have asked that it be shared with the board. You also have to trust the House. The House has been elected just like you have. They have a very specific role. And if you want them to trust your decisions, you also have to trust their decisions. That's what I noticed as an observer. That really struck me. I'm glad I was an observer this year. It made me see things a whole lot differently.
Very good. Well, I mean, I'm sure both of us would encourage all of the folks that listen to this, any AHIMA member, to volunteer at your state to be a delegate. And if you're not quite ready to take on that role, go to the national conference and sit as an observer and watch this.
Yeah.
Spend a day just listening to how folks are trying to further our profession, how AHIMA, our current leadership at the board and on staff, are honestly trying to make this a membership organization that serves the member. And when Shannon and I were talking about doing this episode, I was like, I want to be very careful. I don't want to have like any kind of perception issues about us
Right.
saying anything bad. But, so far it's been really interesting to hear what's going on, but also understand that I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yes.
There's obvious things to work on, but I think our encouragement to members and for listeners would be get involved. At
Absolutely.
minimum, just go observe and understand what folks are doing, what your elected volunteers are doing to further the profession and to take care of things. But I wasn't there. Again, I was cruising, which was fun. I had a good time. But I also typically don't attend the national conference. And Shannon, you do typically attend the national conference. I tend to more go towards the state meeting. But I guess the question, I'll throw it to you first, Shannon, of how does a member or a listener balance their state meeting versus the national conference? Because both have value.
Mm-hmm. I used to typically attend the annual meeting. I have not attended in quite a long time
Okay.
because so I'll say to you members who maybe have never volunteered and don't know the inner workings very much, I will say volunteer so that you understand what's happening. And if you don't want to volunteer right now, at least reach out to your delegates to understand everything that happens from a governance perspective. So because I had that purview of understanding what all was happening at the association level, the AHIMA level, and the board in the house, mostly that association level, I haven't attended. The value wasn't there on members, and you can see it through even. And I know this is a little bit touchy, but even our mission statement, empowering people to impact health, it's super easy, and I definitely think we do that. But nothing about that is focused on membership. And you can tell by the previous leadership team that we had, there was no focus on the member. So I had much more value from the state meeting at that point because the state meeting is focused on the member. What can we do to deliver the most impact for CEUs for our membership? That's quality education and bring people together for networking, volunteering, whatever it is, right? So I haven't typically. I will say that I'm glad I went this year. It was important. I watched some of the vendor room. I think some of the vendors had a lot of engagement and some did not. I think it depends on what they were selling and what people need at this time, or what people are interested in. I think that's who got the most traffic, is who had the product that was of most interest, or the products of most interest. So I would say it depends. Are you looking to be just very specifically engaged in your state, or are you looking to expand your network nationally? Because you really can't do the national very well if you don't have good relationships in your state. Because here's what I do. When I meet somebody new from Kansas, I'm going to go reach out to Amber Epperson and say, hey, do you know this person? Right? You got any experience working with them in the past? Because Amber from Kansas can tell me yes or no, I know this person, right? And I'll be able to better decide what kind of projects I would be willing to work on with that particular person based on some personal experience that other people have. Mm-hmm. So from a national standpoint, if you want to grow nationally and expand your network, I would say go to AHIMA. But I would say your state is, I don't want to give AHIMA less value for sure, but my state is where I started learning the best and the volunteering that then propelled me to that national level. What about you? I mean, I understand you rarely go to the annual. What's the value? What do you think about the state?
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I think for a lot of members, their day job, their organization doesn't cover the cost of going to any conference, whether it's the state or the annual. And the annual conference is a much larger investment. So, for me, it's always been a balance of, if I'm doing this on my own dime, and I've got two daughters that I've got to pay for college, I got to pay for weddings potentially. Like, I'm hoping that they don't ever go to college and they don't get married. But I'm encouraged.
You and Kristen both do not want that to be true.
I'm encouraging them to be monks. But no, I have to balance, right, the family and those type of things, and taking cruises. But so it's priorities, right? It's an investment consideration. There are times to where, with volunteering at the state, I get the opportunity to go to the national, and many state component associations assist with the travel and assist with those type of things. So I've utilized those benefits to go to the national, but I'm also in a non-traditional role. So I need the CEUs, which my state provides, and it provides it at a fairly affordable rate compared to the national side, to where it's just a little more of an investment. But if I'm already getting them from the state, then do I really need the national side? So it's a balance. Part of me misses going to the national, especially to go be an observer at the House and those type of things, because I do think it's important to meet folks from all across the country. So it's a balance, and folks maybe need to consider, alternating.
Yeah.
1 year do your state, 1 year do the national. But
I know a few people that do that.
Yeah. And that's one of those things that maybe I should get into the habit of. I don't know that I have the option anymore to
you don't, buddy.
not
now
go to the state. But
you have to do the state now.
Yeah. So, it's a balance. I would encourage members to consider one or the other. If you could do both, fantastic, right? There's so much value in networking within your state and having those contacts locally, but there's also a lot of value in networking across the country at the AHIMA. So it's a balance. It's an internal decision that you got to make with your budget, but I think there's value in both. And folks should consider both when they make their decisions of how to obtain their education. And I'd call out the board and AHIMA and the House for pushing against the 40% rule, because the states are included now in the education, or not now, but continuing to include the states in the education. And I hope that the folks that made that decision to pull that back understand that there are members that, the state meeting is a big investment for them, let alone a national meeting. So hopefully they understand that. We see that as general members, and I think that's important. So that was fun. Shannan, we were like, maybe we'll do 20 minutes here, but
well, here's the interesting thing. I saved one little nugget for you, especially Seth, for the very end. And I'm going to make you jealous. Well, first of all, I got to hang out with Mississippi. I got to hang out with Lori significant amount of time. Not significant, but a lot. So that was pretty awesome. She had Sam with her. So that was great. But my thing that I'm going to use to hurt your heart is that on the last night's reception, AHIMA provided dueling pianos for the show.
Love dueling pianos.
No, you do. It was so good. And they had everyone, they were getting people involved. They had people on stage dancing. Our speaker-elect was on stage dancing, and Kevin and his wife both were on stage. Actually, I think I have a video of Mississippi and Kevin dancing on the stage together.
Oh, my goodness. That does not surprise me.
So, the dueling pianos were phenomenal. So kudos, AHIMA. That was a lot of stinking fun.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, it sounds like that was a great recap. I think hopefully members appreciate the opportunity to hear, because some of us, didn't have the opportunity to go. I'd say many of our members didn't have the opportunity to go, or did not choose to go this year. So this is a good opportunity to understand what happened, what was going on, and then we can go from there. So Shannan, that was a lot of fun.
It was, man. I'll see you next time. It was so fun. I'm glad you're back, by the way, stateside.
Yep, exactly. All right, Shannan. Until next time, my friend.
All right, buddy.